Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking, they change laws, change society, or even earn the label crime of the century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. In early July of 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. By then, we were already a year into the Revolutionary War, the first shots having been fired in April of 1775 at Lexington and Concord, Paul Revere and all that. And you know this thanks to American schooling. But what most of us don't know is that simultaneous with all that eastern seaboard ruckus, a well-educated Spanish-born Franciscan priest was already walking up the Pacific coast, planting Christianity like corn, laying the groundwork for much of what would become California, and for the modern cities of San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. In 1769, this humble friar established the first mission in San Diego. The next year, he built another in Carmel. The year after that, he added two more, one more in Central California and another near Los Angeles. The year after that, he founded yet another, this time in San Luis Obispo. And just 5 months after the founding fathers were busy declaring independence, on November 1st, 1776, the jewel of the missions was established at what's now San Juan Capistrano. It was the 7th of 21 Catholic missions that would eventually stretch up the coast. It's the one famous for its swallows, which return to roost more or less on schedule. Now, some of you might want to weigh in now and tell me that California was part of New Spain at the time, and it was not, technically at least, an American story yet. True. But tell that to California, a state that for decades mandated that its fourth graders build little mission replicas and learn the story of Father Junípero Serra, an evangelizing Catholic cleric who, they were told, civilized the indigenous people and taught them how to farm and pray. Here was a man, they were taught, who stood up for the rights of the native people he befriended and likely saved them from the wrath of the conquistadors who followed close behind. In some, they're taught that the man known widely as the Apostle of California was a selfless, visionary priest, someone who helped shape the Golden State into what it would one day become. You know, that state that all by itself has the fourth largest economy in the world. And I almost forgot, the fourth grade platoons are also told that because Father Serra planted grapevines at Mission San Diego de Cala, the first such plantings that yielded purposeful grapes, he is also known as the Father of California wine. A nation of us that cannot afford French wine are grateful. Trouble is, that's just one side of the story. The other might be a crime of the century. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by ButcherBox. All right, it's Thanksgiving week, which means my fridge is somehow full and empty at the same time.
You mean full of ingredients and empty of actual meals.
Exactly. That's why I'm grateful for ButcherBox right now.
Same. It's one thing to feed us, but feeding everyone during the busiest time of the year? Nope.
ButcherBox just takes the stress down several notches.
And everything is antibiotic-free and hormone-free. It's nice to know we're cooking with proteins we can actually trust, not whatever mystery pack is left at the store after everyone panic shops.
And with how chaotic this week gets, having a box that's curated or fully customizable makes life so much easier.
What did we grab this month?
Salmon for something lighter midweek, chicken thighs for the big everyone fend for yourself dinner, and 2 of the ribeyes for us once the chaos dies down.
Little reward for surviving the holidays.
As an exclusive offer, our listeners can get free steak in every box for a year, plus $20 off your first box when you go to butcherbox.com/COTC.
That's right. Your choice of filet mignon, New York strip, or ribeye in every box for an entire year, plus $20 off your first box and free shipping always.
That's butcherbox.com/COTC. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. By the time Father Serra arrived in what's now California, Spanish colonization was already well underway in parts of the Americas, but Alta California remained largely untouched by European hands. It was 1769, and Serra had come not with a sword, but with a cross. Accompanied by soldiers and settlers, he began establishing missions along the coast, intending to convert and quote-unquote civilize the indigenous populations he encountered. Luis J. Miranda Ramirez, an Esalen tribal chairwoman, shares an emotional perspective, her own and that of the native peoples of coastal California, on how Serra's arrival was experienced by those he encountered.
I feel the pain that my ancestors went through. I think of what they went through, the shackles, the whippings, and I think, how could you do this to them? And how could you believe that you're right to do that to anyone at all, any human? You don't deserve to be considered a great person, a saint, close to God or godliness when you hurt someone.
To Ramirez and her fellow indigenous people, Father Serra committed transgressions so profound, they rise to the level of crimes against humanity, mass enslavement, systemic torture, and wholesale genocide. But wait, judgment on Serra has already been rendered. He has been found, officially, not guilty. That's because in 2015, Pope Francis declared Father Serra a Catholic saint. This, despite the charges against him, despite long-standing protest, despite evidence that Ramirez may be right. Now might be a good time to say, it's not really my business who gets canonized. I was raised Catholic, but I'm not really Catholic, and I'm never going to say any religion has it right or wrong. And for the record, I understand the late Pope's admiration for Serra. At first, both men belonged to the Franciscan order, an order founded in 1209 by Francis of Assisi, himself a saint, patron of animals, the environment, and of Italy. He's also the namesake of San Francisco. World Animal Day, in fact, is October 4th, his feast day. So if I had to pick a team, his sounds delightful. Second, the stated mission of the Franciscans is to evangelize. Go out into the world and convert the heathen to what they believe. And Serra was absolutely doing that. The evidence of his zeal is abundant. The evidence against him comes, in part, from his own letters. That's because the Native Americans of California didn't have a written language to document what they endured. But the stories of punishment and enslavement at the hands of missionaries were vivid and preserved through oral tradition. And while some of what they endured can be gleaned from what we know about how Spanish conquerors treated those they conquered, the missionaries at the time believed they were protecting the natives by keeping them within the walls of the mission. Also relevant, the late Pope was from Argentina, and during Serra's era, California was not an American state, it was part of Latin America. So canonizing an American saint while visiting the U.S. might have felt a bit like destiny. He did it on September 23, 2015, during a mass at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. Side note for the non-Catholics, Serra wasn't the first American saint. That was Elizabeth Ann Seton, founder of the Sisters of Charity. Of the 9 U.S. saints, 6 are women. Just thought I'd throw that in. Anyway, this is a true crime podcast, so let's get to looking at the evidence. We'll start with the defense, but first, a quick pronunciation note. The standard Spanish pronunciation of Serra's first name is Junípero, but Californians say Junípero, and we're using the version locals would. Anyway, Serra was born Miguel José Serra in 1713 in the village of Petra on the island of Mallorca. His parents were peasant farmers. Nearby was the Church of San Bernardino, home to a community of Franciscan friars. Young Serra often visited, expressing from an early age his desire to give his life to the church. As with many kids in Petra, he attended the friars' school, where he was deemed a very good student in a wide variety of subjects. A well-rounded, if slightly built, conscientious kid who was deeply interested in learning Gregorian chants. Sent as a young teenager to Palma de Mallorca so that he could attend a better Franciscan school, it was no surprise that he signed up a year later to join the order. Serra scholar Father James Garneau explained it this way in a 2015 radio interview for the Diocese of Raleigh.
And he came to join the Franciscans and a particular branch of the Franciscans, which is important to note, a group called the Observant Franciscans, suggesting, of course, that some were not observant, but that is, in fact, some of the struggle of that time. Could there be a revival of the true spirit of St. Francis within the community of his followers, of his disciples, brothers and priests, the friars? And so Junípero Serra chose to join this more intense group, trying to intensify the spirit of Francis in the world.
José Serra took the name Junípero after one of St. Francis's closest companions. He studied logic and theology for 7 years, took vows of poverty and chastity, and was ordained a priest. According to biographers Don DeNevi and Noel Francis Maholi, Serra revered stories of the lives of Franciscan martyrs who had left the safety of their European homes to evangelize to those yet unsaved. He taught philosophy and theology for a time before earning his doctorate at Lulian College, a Franciscan institution founded in the 14th century and devoted to the teachings of Ramon Llull, a deep-thinking mystic committed to evangelism, specifically in Africa. I bring this up because a lot of Spanish missionaries who made it to the New World were familiar with Llull's teachings. Early on, the devotees of Llull had even joined Columbus's second voyage to the Americas. But I digressed. Just know that Junípero Serra was considered an exceptional scholar and was on his way to a life of prestigious academic exploration when he decided to take on the harder work of converting the New World's pagans. Back to Garneau.
Franciscans, of course, had been in the New World for more than a couple of hundred years, but there was also within the observant Franciscan movement a renewed enthusiasm to begin again the missions. They had in some ways become rather routine, and for example, many of the missionaries in the New World didn't speak the languages of the native peoples that they were there serving.
When Serra's ship landed at Veracruz, Mexico in 1749, the 35-year-old cleric took the first chance he got to implement the words of St. Francis, who believed friars should not ride on beasts of burden unless they were physically unable to walk. So he walked the 250 miles to Mexico City. Along the way, he suffered an insect bite that never fully healed, leaving him with a chronically infected wound. Despite this, he insisted on traveling by foot for the rest of his life. Though it slowed him down, scholars have calculated he walked an estimated 24,000 miles through Baja and Alta California in his lifetime. He began by building 5 missions in the Sierra Gorda region of central Mexico, a UNESCO World Heritage Site today. Serra's credited with completing the conversion of the local population. In 1752, Serra was appointed to the Spanish Inquisition. Primarily, the Inquisition looked to identify heretics, accuse them of crimes, force them to confess or convert amid charges of Protestantism, blasphemy, sodomy, and witchcraft. In lieu of conversion, and sometimes despite it, these charges usually ended badly for the accused. Serra's role appears to have been administrative. and there's limited direct documentation of what he did. His first biographer, a fellow friar, wrote that Serra traveled widely during this period. Serra went back to teaching, but remained a driven man. Historian Daniel Fogel, in his 1988 book, Junípero Serra, The Vatican and Enslavement Theology, described how Serra practiced extreme penance, flogging himself with whips, wearing hair shirts embedded with wire, and spending nights on his knees in prayer rather than sleeping. Garneau addressed these rituals in context.
In the context of the time, of course, the Franciscans were flogging themselves. And so a renewed Franciscan spirituality, in which they were completely immersed and given to, would have meant a kind of medieval spirituality, whereby the wearing of chains and even painful devices that would remind people of the necessity of uniting every moment of their day to the passion of Jesus Christ would have been normative for the evangelizers.
Mm-hmm. In 1767, when the Spanish king threw the Jesuits out of the missions in Baja California, the Franciscans decided it was time to not just replace them, but to forge forward into Alta California to save souls and further Spanish colonial interests by helping to thwart the ambitions of Russian explorers who wanted to get a foothold in the New World. So it was that the now 55-year-old Father Serra joined military commander Gaspar de Portola and his troops on their way north, arriving in San Diego on July 1st, 1769. Along the 300-mile journey, dozens died from disease and exposure. What lay ahead would demand even more of them. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Drip Drop. Scott, you know how you can hand me a glass of plain water and I look at it like it personally insulted me?
Yes. You're the only person I know who needs emotional support to drink water.
I should honestly be experimented upon, but this is why Drip Drop has become part of my daily routine.
And you've been in your hydration era. I've seen it.
Drip Drop just makes it easy. A doctor-developed, proven fast hydration, and it uses this precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose that helps your body absorb it fast. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks, so you feel the difference quickly. More energy, better focus, and I swear my skin looks better.
And you drink it constantly. What's your go-to flavor?
Berry in the original line. They have 16 original flavors and 8 zero sugar options, and they all actually taste good, which for someone who hates plain water is essential.
And it's engineered to rehydrate you faster than water alone. That's why it's trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top college and pro teams.
Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code COTC.
That's dripdrop.com, promo code COTC for 20% off.
Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Dripdrop.com and use promo code COTC now. As the missionary expedition reached San Diego in 1769, Serra had already endured disease, exhaustion, and a festering leg wound. But he also began documenting what he saw and how he interpreted the people he encountered. Here's an excerpt from a letter Serra wrote about that journey to his missionary friend and first biographer, Father Paulo. Quote, "We have seen Indians in immense numbers, and all those on this coast of the Pacific contribute to make a good subsistence on various seeds and by fishing. All the males, old and young, go naked. The women, however, and the female children are decently covered from their breasts downward. We found on our journey, as well as in the place where we stopped, that they treated us with much confidence and goodwill as if they had known us all their lives." End quote. Some indigenous people, he wrote, were so intrigued by the visitors that they tagged along. Serra recorded that they were all well-fed and unafraid. But there would be trouble ahead as Serra relentlessly marched up and down the coast, establishing missions every 30 miles or so, a distance calculated to be about a day's ride on horseback or 3 days on foot. Serra was present for the founding of several key missions. San Diego de Alcalá in 1769, San Carlos Borromeo del Carmelo near Monterrey in 1770, San Gabriel Arcángel in 1771, San Luis Obispo de Tolosa in 1772, San Juan Capistrano in 1775, San Francisco de Asís in 1776, Santa Clara de Asís in 1777, and Santa Barbara in 1782. If you were paying close attention to that lineup, you may have noticed a gap in the timeline around 1773 and 1774. That's when, according to Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles, as quoted in the National Catholic Register, Serra, quote, had in fact been a protector and defender of the Indians and had gained a Bill of Rights for them, end quote, when he traveled to Mexico City in 1773. ICT News and AmericanCatholic.org go further, saying the rights Serra fought for and obtained were, quote, the first significant legislation in California, a Bill of Rights for Native Americans, end quote. Father Serra died at age 70 in 1784 at Mission San Carlos Borromeo in Carmel, where he is buried. He died of tuberculosis, possibly worsened by lingering complications from that severe insect bite decades earlier. In his defense, Father Serra's intentions were not murderous. His goal was to bring Christianity and salvation to unconverted indigenous people and to shape them into Spanish citizens who would support colonial goals. To some, his writings showed genuine concern for the souls of those he encountered. Robert Senkowitz, a professor emeritus at Santa Clara University and leading Serra historian, read aloud from one of Serra's letters at the 2020 Napa Conference. Written in 1775 to the Mexican viceroy after a fellow priest was killed by indigenous people, Serra wrote,
"One of the most important things that I requested at the beginning of these conquests was that if the Indians were to kill me, whether they be Gentiles or Christians, they should be forgiven. And now I make the same request of you. If they, the Indians, have already killed the missionary, what are we to gain with military campaigns? Let the murderer live so he can be saved, which is the purpose of our coming here and the reason for forgiving him. Help him to understand with some moderate punishment that he is being pardoned in accordance with our laws, which order us to forgive offenses and to prepare him not for his death, but for eternal life."
While compassionate, Senkowitz said this letter should not be taken as proof that Serra viewed indigenous people as his equals. In a 1744 sermon, Serra referred to indigenous peoples as, quote, inferior people, end quote. His defenders call that benign paternalism. Senkowitz, a noted expert on the man, broke down what that meant for Serra while quoting from various sermons the priest gave in Mexico. Quote, "The harmony between love and strictness is what characterizes a true father. It is precisely because the father loves him that the father teaches him to obey. When he misbehaves, the father scolds and punishes him so that the son can correct his mistakes. The Divine Father behaves in a similar way with men who are his own sons."
And at the missions, when Indians misbehaved, they were punished. They were punished generally with whipping. And then the major form of misbehaving was either leaving the missions. I think it must be admitted that the missionaries, Serra included, didn't do a great job of telling people when they were going to be baptized that as far as the church is concerned, baptism is a lifetime commitment. You know, so some guys are being baptized just to be polite. And then they figure, okay, that's fine, now I can go back home. And they find out that they're not allowed to go back home.
Now, there's some agreement among historians that however harsh life was under Serra, it may have been less brutal than what indigenous people would have faced under Spanish soldiers, mine owners, and other colonial forces.
And what the missionaries were trying to do was gather the Indians together to protect them from the ravages and the oppressions of the conquistadores and their successors on the haciendas and the silver mines. The missionaries deeply believed that without them, the Indians would be oppressed and worked to death.
A thorough look at Serra's letters from that period supports that view. One historian has suggested that Serra believed that the natives had absorbed his lessons so completely that he had every intention of handing over the missions to those who had converted. Bishop Robert Barron, who served in the Los Angeles Archdiocese from 2015 to 2022, insisted that Serra was loved by the native people he served.
Consult the historians. Junípero Serra was someone who was reverenced by the native people, deeply mourned upon his death, someone who defended the rights of the native peoples, as the archbishops point out, who made a journey on foot all the way to Mexico City to encourage the writing of a Bill of Rights to support the native peoples. So, the calumny here against Serra personally is obvious and outrageous. But here's the thing, everybody, that particularly concerns and bothers me. I don't know how you construe this other than a deep form of anti-Catholicism.
Others find that view disingenuous at best and deliberately obscuring at worst. Crimes of Centuries is sponsored by Hims. So, Scott and I were talking the other day about how so many people deal with health stuff quietly, things that are a lot more common than anyone thinks.
Yeah, and a lot of guys especially tend to keep things bottled up instead of getting help.
Which is why I like how straightforward Hims makes everything.
Exactly. According to the National Institutes of Health, as many as 30 million men in the U.S. experience ED. So this is something a lot of people are dealing with.
Through Hims, you can access personalized prescription treatment options, things like hard mints and SexRx plus Climax Control, if prescribed.
They also offer access to trusted generics that cost up to 90% less than brand names, which is a huge help.
Everything's done online, so you don't have to sit in a waiting room or rearrange your week. It's your goals first, your comfort first, and real medical providers making sure you get what you need.
Think of Hims as a digital front door that helps you get back to feeling like yourself, with simple 100% online access to trusted treatments for ED and more.
To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/COTC.
That's hims.com/COTC for your free online visit. hims.com/COTC.
Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. There's an anecdote that is often repeated when discussing Serra's treatment of his potential converts. Apparently, it was widely known in Europe at the time that Spanish colonialism was particularly barbarous. That extended to the 15,000 Spanish who came to the New World between 1500 and 1800 and forced the local people they found in what's now California to work on their massive ranchos and grueling silver mines. In a German pamphlet that was circulated widely, the Spanish military and clergy were depicted as engaging in gruesome and heinous acts of torture. One of the illustrations showed a proud Native American burning at the stake as Serra, or someone like him, stood by, trying to save his soul. The anecdote has it that the priest asked the man, who is bound to the stake with flames encroaching, if he would like to repent so he can get into heaven. The man then asked the priest, "Are there Christians there?" The priest excitedly responded with, "Oh yes, it's filled with them." The enslaved man took no time in replying that, in that case, no thanks. Rotting in hell sounds better. Not exactly a ringing endorsement of mission life. In fact, again, as his own letters show, the missionaries were welcomed by the natives and, in turn, the missionaries invited them to come inside the mission to worship. But coming inside the mission meant living there, adapting to the Spanish way of doing things, including farming and family life. These missions aren't just churches, but entire complexes of barracks, offices, furnaces, kilns, gardens, kitchens, and hospital facilities. The friars made it a point to say that inside was safe, outside was not. And, having several clashes with the rifles of the Spanish armies, the natives may have agreed. But there was no leaving, and there was punishment for breaking any rule the priests made. In a Wall Street Journal video, Senkowitz said,
So one of the things that Indians experienced in the California missions is they were being punished for the violation of norms that they had no part in articulating or forming.
The punishments usually involve floggings or being put into stocks for days without food or water. The priests, as you might recall, were not unaware of the physical pain caused by the whippings and deprivations they meted out. There is a smattering of pushback from those who deny that Father Serra ran that harsh of a ship. Bishop Barron of Los Angeles objects to the characterization. He says it's an abomination.
That these missions are being construed now as like antebellum homes in pre-Civil War South where slavery was carried on. And even worse, may I just say it because the language is here, they're being construed as the moral equivalent of Dachau and Auschwitz.
Yes and no. In one letter to the military commander nearest his mission, Serra asked that runaway neophytes be punished, specifically with 2 or 3 rounds of whipping and a period of exile. Referring to himself as the shepherd and the runaways as sheep, Serra wrote,
This should be a good lesson for them as well as for the others. If you do not have shackles on hand over there at the Presidio, let me know they can be sent from here.
When this type of reliable artifact is raised with the church, the general response is regret, but often paired with the view that this was simply a relic of the time. Alan Leventhal, an emeritus lecturer at San Jose State who specializes in Native American studies, ethnohistory, and tribal archaeology, rejects that rationale. In a Stanford University journalism project, Leventhal said,
On the one hand, Junípero Serra was a product of the Hispanic Empire and the Catholic Church with a set of agendas to basically colonize non-Christian areas of the world, transform and convert into Catholicism indigenous populations so that essentially that they would be a peon-based labor force in order to support the outposts of the empire. So the question arises is, what were the miracles that Junípero Serra performed, other than establishing these missions that 4th graders are told to somewhat idolize, and that the argument on the one hand, through the lens of either the church apologists, and Westerners, is that they brought civilization, they brought agriculture. On the other hand, through the lens of Native Americans, they brought death, destruction, intolerance.
Leventhal isn't finished either. He says that the real miracle is that, by 1900 or 1920, fewer than 100 people remained from any of the cultures enslaved during the mission era. That decimation shaped generations. For Luis Ramirez of the Esalen people, the safest option for our ancestors was to blend into Mexican culture and, in her words, hide. The cost was steep, the complete fragmentation of tribal tradition and language. Today, there are no living native speakers of the Ajashman language. The Ajashman, renamed by Serra as the Juaneños, had lived for centuries in what is now Orange County. The founding of Mission San Juan Capistrano in 1775 ended that continuity. Their language, believed to be Aztec in origin, lost its final fluent speaker in the 2010s. The impact wasn't just linguistic, it was cultural genocide. Valentin Lopez, a member of the Ama Mutsun tribal land, told PBS SoCal's Democracy Now! That
they separated families, mothers from fathers from children. Part of the reason for that is so that the parents couldn't pass on the culture to the children. The missions would use shackles and they used stocks on the Indians. When they separated the families, the women were repeatedly raped by the soldiers. The conditions of the missions were horrible. Whenever disease would come, it would just go through like a wildfire. It wasn't unusual to have 1,200 Indians dying at one time.
Let's start with the near extermination of the Ama Mutsun in particular, a people who had lived in what is now Monterey, Santa Cruz, and Santa Clara for hundreds of years. On their website, the tribal band explains that Spanish colonization, especially the arrival of Franciscan friars, began with the replacement of tribal shrines with Christian icons. That was followed by forced relocation from their villages and the destruction of sacred trees, including one at Monterey. Upon baptism, the tribal history indicates that they became the church's property. From that point forward, they lost their identity, their beliefs, and the ability to pass either down to their children, if there were any left to teach. Many deaths were caused by direct abuse, neglect, or crowding within the mission system. Others were the result of imported disease. Smallpox, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and measles tore through communities. But the behavior of the conquistadors compounded the toll. Spanish soldiers frequently raped indigenous women they believed they had the right to control. In doing so, they spread syphilis to women, their partners, and their unborn children. According to Lopez,
when they were closing the mission, the last Padre Presidente said, "We are going to be judged very harshly. All we have done was consecrate, baptize, and bury the Indians. There are no Indians along the coast of California. We have killed, they're all dead." And they said, we need to come up with an alibi or an excuse for what happened. And so the Catholic Church started creating the myth that Junípero Serra was wonderful to the Indians, that the Indians came in voluntarily. They came in for a better life. They came in to learn agriculture. They came in to find God.
Lopez says the myth won the day. So did its corollary, that Serra fought for and established a Bill of Rights for indigenous peoples. Okay, but documentation of that claim is vague at best, if any exists at all. There are those who suggest that the trip to Mexico City in 1773, the one in which Serra successfully lobbied for the replacement of a military commander with whom he was constantly at odds, was prompted by his utter horror at the rampant sexual abuses of indigenous women committed by that commander and allowed under his command. But there is no evidence that shows he went further. There's no indication in those letters and documents that survive that any of his efforts were aimed at leveling the playing field for those in his missions. If he made such an effort, no one listened to him. No one wrote it down. Crimes of the Century is sponsored by Miracle Made. After being away from home for a few nights, I realize how picky I am about my sleep setup. If the bedding runs too hot, too cold, too anything, I am done.
Yeah, nothing like one night on scratchy hotel sheets to make you appreciate your own bed.
This is why I love being back at home, sleeping atop our Miracle Made sheets. They're inspired by NASA tech and use this silver-infused temperature-regulating fabric, so I'm not waking up sweaty, freezing, or wrestling the blankets at 3 a.m.
And honestly, sleeping at the right temperature makes everything better. But I also like that they stay clean longer. Regular sheets can hold more bacteria than a toilet seat, which is horrifying. But Miracle Made's silver technology helps prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth.
Upgrade your sleep or give the gift of better rest. Go to trymiracle.com/COTC to try Miracle Made sheets today. You'll save over 40%, and when you use promo code COTC, you'll get an extra 20% off, plus a free 3-piece towel set.
They really do make a great gift.
And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk.
That's trymiracle.com/COTC, code COTC at checkout.
Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. Becoming a saint is hard and decidedly uphill. In 1934, the Diocese of Monterey-Fresno put Father Serra's name forward as someone the church should consider for beatification, the first step toward sainthood. That kicked off a decades-long campaign by the Catholic Church to gather supporting evidence. Monsignor Francis Weber, in his decidedly partial biography, Blessed Fray Junípero Serra, an outstanding California hero, described what happened next. In 1948, a formal proceeding was held in Fresno, led by a Bishop Willinger. Everyone involved had to swear oaths of fidelity and secrecy. Judges were empowered to question witnesses with queries submitted by the so-called devil's advocate. The church reviewed more than 2,000 documents, 7,500 pages of Serra's own writings, for doctrinal soundness. Representatives of the Catholic Church had spoken as well to 200 or so descendants of California settlers who had known Serra personally. In the California Frontier Project, in a story entitled 5 Reasons Pope Francis Canonized Junípero Serra, Damian Basich quotes Weber as indicating that an unending chorus of encomiums, I had to look it up, it means words of high praise, spoke of his worthiness for beatification. In fact, the encomiums made up 620 pages of the report to the Vatican. The church was in no hurry. Serra wasn't beatified until 1988, which simply meant that he was worthy of public reverence. From that point on, little pockets of devotees have prayed for the miracles necessary for Serra to qualify for sainthood. In Orange County alone, twin sisters Mary and Cecilia Priestler kept the home fires burning, making dioramas, talking to school children, holding private masses, actively looking for cases to document and to present to the Vatican. It was an effort to push Serra past the 2,000 other candidates for sainthood that were waiting for the Vatican's sacred nod. Now, canonization normally follows a strict and lengthy path. For context, St. Bede's sainthood took 770 years. St. Paul II? Just 9. Serra's timeline wasn't unusual, but how he crossed the finish line was. Typically, sainthood requires approval from 3 commissions: theological, historical, and medical. The medical team investigates reported miracles. And yes, a miracle usually means someone with a terminal illness survives after praying specifically to the candidate for intervention. But there's a catch. If they also prayed to, say, the Virgin Mary, it muddies the waters. The miracle has to be clearly attributed to the candidate alone. The Vatican verified only one such miracle for Serra, the 1960 healing of a nun with lupus, a miracle validated in St. Louis, where she was being cared for, and in Rome. That validation process took 28 years, hence the delay in his official beatification. But Pope Francis, because he was the Pope, can and did waive the 2 miracle rule, determining that, as the Catholic Conference newsletter explained, quote, the holiness of his life outweighed the need for miracles, end quote. The protests upon the announcement of his impending sainthood were loud and angry. Most were from outside the church, but a few came from within. Let's pause here for a quick reminder about papal bulls, official declarations issued by the Pope. One of the most infamous, Dum Diversas, was issued in 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. It gave the King of Portugal permission to enslave any non-Christians he encountered. 3 years later, that authority was extended to all Catholic nations interested in expanding their empires and, of course, their slave trades. In 1493, a year after Christopher Columbus reached the Americas, Pope Alexander VI said Spain and Portugal had the exclusive right to colonize and convert new lands and new peoples, legitimizing their claim to ownership of it and all the people within it. Taken together, these are known as the doctrine of discovery, and they let Catholic nations do as they pleased with any and all they found when they so much as landed on foreign turf. This effectively stripped the indigenous people of their right to rule themselves and any claim to own their land. Yeah, but in 1537, Pope Paul III issued a papal bull that declared that indigenous peoples were fully human and capable of understanding and accepting the Catholic faith. He forbade their enslavement. Which raises the question if everything that happened after 1537 was a mortal sin. Sorry, this one's over my head. Still, those doctrines weren't forgotten. In July of 2015, while he was visiting Latin America, the Pope apologized for the Church's treatment of the indigenous peoples during colonization. This is Pope Francis speaking through an interpreter.
I say this to you with regret. Many grave sins were committed against the native peoples of America in the name of God. I humbly ask forgiveness, not only for the offenses of the Church herself, but also for crimes committed against the native peoples during the so-called conquest of America.
And yet, Serra's canonization still went forward with all those complaints on the record. We don't know exactly how many formal letters the Vatican received objecting to Serra's sainthood, but one tribe, the Ama Mutsun, represented by Valentin Lopez, said they sent 6 letters to the Pope and 2 to California Governor Jerry Brown. The response they got, according to Lopez, was a 1-page note that said the Church had looked at the record and found him worthy of sainthood. Their conscience was clear.
That
was the Pope making it official. That day, the Pope would say that, quote, Junípero Serra left his native land and its easy way of life. He was excited about blazing trails, going forth to meet many people, learning and valuing their particular customs and ways of life, end quote. It was not the final word on the matter. Just days after Serra's canonization, the Carmel Mission Basilica, where Serra is buried, was vandalized. The perpetrators splattered paint on the mission's walls and toppled statues both inside and outside the basilica. Officer Esther Partido of the Carmel Police Department told the New York Times, quote, "This is something we were pretty much expecting. There's a lot of controversy over his treatment of Native Americans during the time that he was here," end quote. The Los Angeles Times reported that the vandalism was being investigated as a hate crime, not because indigenous graves were desecrated, but precisely because they weren't. 5 people were eventually charged with felony vandalism, but those charges were later reduced to misdemeanors. They had to participate in restorative justice measures such as restitution to the church, apologizing, and engaging in historical seminars on the topic. California. In 2018, Stanford University stripped Serra's name from 2 campus buildings and a pedestrian mall. That same year, Los Angeles removed his name from a city park, and the state capitol replaced his statue with one of indigenous peoples. In June and July of 2020, during the George Floyd protests, Serra statues in San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles, and Ventura were either toppled or preemptively removed by city officials. The California Catholic Conference of Bishops issued a statement that reaffirmed their commitment against racism, but reiterated their belief that Serra had been an advocate for Native justice. Smithsonian Magazine carried a piece by Aaron Blakemore that framed Serra's story as the West Coast incarnation of some of the founding myths of the United States. Quote, "Just as the stories of Columbus, Pocahontas, and the Puritans are incomplete without including the fate of displaced and mistreated Native populations, so too is that of the settlement of the Pacific Coast," end quote. So, why single out Serra? Because crime is sometimes in the eye of the beholder, I guess, and usually judged within the times in which the alleged crimes are committed, however egregious. The Smithsonian piece cited Jeffrey M. Burns, a Serra scholar who directs the University of San Diego's Francis G. Harps Center for Catholic Thought and Culture. He said, quote, "Serra would have seen everything at the mission as Native people's property, something he was holding in trust for them. It may not have worked out that way, but that's how he understood it," end quote. That rings true, but it still concerns me that, according to biographers, Serra admitted in letters that he had no knack for learning indigenous languages, which means he never really asked them what they thought or what they were losing. In 2023, 8 years after Serra's canonization, Pope Francis formally repudiated the doctrines of discovery, affirming that all people have inherent rights and dignity, regardless of religion, nationality, or empire. At Mission San Juan Capistrano, a chapel in which Father Serra held Mass, still stands. It is the oldest building in continuous use in the state. It still welcomes more than 300,000 visitors every year. To research this case, journalist Amy Wilson leaned a bit on personal experience. She lived in California for a decade, 1 year in which her daughter was a fourth grader. She learned about Father Serra as she lived in Orange County, where the San Juan Capistrano mission is located. She read a great deal of the coverage of Serra's veneration, deep diving into the scholarly debate. She read Rosemarie Beebe and Robert M. Senkiewicz's books, Junípero Serra, California, Indians, and the Transformation of a Missionary, as well as Missionary Conquest, the Gospel and Native American Cultural Genocide. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Join us at patreon.com/GrabBagCollab to hear not just exclusive content related to this show, but to also get access to several other shows on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this show was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Amanda Rossman and Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and occasionally by my son, Hunt Van Ben Scoten. Other music comes from Soundstripe and Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com.